Hi, I'm Jay,
I'm Frida.
and our curation topic is post-humanist perspective in Korean and Mexican culture. We're gonna share the screen. So the reason for this interest in this topic goes back to the day November 2nd.
November 2nd is Dia de los Muertos, a Mexican tradition in which Mexicans celebrate the dead members of their family, friends, or even pets. And we do it by putting an altar, setting an altar in our houses in which we put a picture of our loved ones or family members. Then we accommodate some favorite foods of them, like even like candies or traditional Mexican dishes. We put also flowers and candles, and we are waiting for them to come at night so they can eat their favorite food and they can visit us at our place. But when I was telling this story to Jay, she was amazed because there is also a similar tradition they have in Korea.
Which is called 제사, uh, which is pretty much very similar to Mexican one. We prepare food for our ancestors, the things that they liked. We put their pictures and incense and wait for them to visit us and give us blessings. In return, we give them food and we bow to them. But in the vibe is pretty much different because in Mexico they celebrate, but in Korea we do it in a very solemn way. But the main part of this tradition is very similar, which was very interesting.
So after having this conversation, we were talking about other similar traditions we have, like concerning to food or cultural stuff, but we ended up with oral tradition.
So in Korea, we have this oral tradition, which is stories being told through mouth. So, but for generations and generations. So our grandmother knows about it, my mother, me, and also my students know about it, but the author and the origin is not known. We just memorize it and it's told by storytelling form. But in Mexico, they also have this oral tradition.
We also have similar traditions that are mainly born in indigenous cultures in Mexico, so Aztec cultures, Mayan cultures. And these stories are also told through generations from grandparents to parents, parents to children, and we know them by heart. And they are told also in schools, in events, like in family gatherings. So we were very surprised about the similar traditions we had, and then we found this issue. How is that we didn't know about how similar our cultures were? So we were wondering what happened there. And one of the issues we found is like the lack of translations, because normally for me to know something about Asian cultures, I need English as a mediator language. So if I want to know about their culture, I need to go to a website that is in English, or a video that is in English, or books that are in English. And the same for them. Like if she wants to know something about Mexico, she needs English as a mediator. And we were thinking about that issue. Why can we know about our cultures without needing English as a bridge?
And this leads to model that we are gonna be using. It's called center periphery model, which we learned in our translation class. It talks about hierarchical structure of languages, but in this case, we would be focusing not in languages, but in culture, because Korean culture and Mexican culture is quite considered located in periphery area. So that connects to what Frida was saying. We don't really have a direct route for our intercultural exchange. So we would be looking this oral tradition with the center periphery model, and also we would be using post-humanism because
Because when we were talking about the stories that we're telling to explain the world, for example, to explain why nature is this way or certain natural phenomena, we use anthropomorphized characters. But we know that nature is in the center of it all. So we are not saying that us human beings are the center of everything and everything is made for us. So we are thinking about how nature has its own mind, how they also have feelings, animals have feelings. So this helps people to empathize with nature more. So we don't have this distinct distance between nature and humans. So we are like talking about interconnectedness,
Mhm.
and that's part of post-humanist perspective.
Mhm. It's also approaching and understanding nature as an entity uh, that having their own narratives. So we're respecting nature as part of our
Mhm.
human lives. So for the audience, we are targeting 3 to 6 year old children, and for the reason for this is that oral tradition itself is meant to be told orally in a storytelling form. But when it comes to older children, they're more used to reading text by themselves, whereas younger children, for example, 3 to 6 year old children, they're they get more affected or get more immersed when they're told these stories. So, and also they're starting to get used to the text, so it's more suitable for them um, for these oral traditions to be told to them. So we targeted 3 to 6 year old children, and also the oral tradition. They are mostly very short stories. So adults can memorize them, but because it's memorizing it, uh, it's also mm, accepting the fact that it could be some parts could be deducted or some parts could be added according to the children or according to the environment or surroundings. So there's very much versatility to it, which is also the essence of oral tradition. And also because it's told through voice, there is musicality to it. There would be sound, rhythms added to this story. So we thought 3 to 6 year old children would be very suitable audience. Mhm.
And however, our audience is 3 to 6 year old children. We're also relying on adults to tell these stories because they are the ones that can read the stories and then memorize them and then tell them to children. So this is also another way to connect children with other children also and adults
Mm,
by telling these stories in a community way and not in an individual way.
mm.
So for the selection criteria of our text, we started with our first story. That's one of example of our curation. So when we were having this conversation about our stories, I asked Jay if she has some stories about the moon, because in Mexico we have this story called Quetzalcoatl y el Conejo. That is an Aztec story about how the moon has craters. And it is all because of a rabbit help Quetzalcoatl to create these craters in the moon. And in Korean tradition, they also have a similar story about the craters in the moon that also relates to a rabbit.
It's called Paltoki, which literally translates to moon rabbit. Um, it's same as what Frida was saying. We're taking this natural phenomena, which is moon having craters. We're explaining it using rabbits and moon, describing moon as some kind of village, uh, and rabbits uh, making mochis with wooden stick and how that's affecting the moon on the surface. So it's very interesting how we share this common oral tradition.
So this is some example of our curation, but we are not very sure that we'll find similar stories that we explain how the moon was created, and then it's the same story in the Korean culture. We'll find different stories, but in the end, it's the same essence, how we use stories to explain the world. So for the selection criteria of the Mexican stories, I'm going to use the digital publications run by the Instituto Nacional de Pueblos Indígenas. That's the Indigenous Institute of Indigenous communities. It's run by the Mexican government.
And in Korea, for Korean stories, I would be using Encyclopedia of Korean Folk Culture, which is also run by Korean government, National Folk Museum of Korea. They keep this oral tradition stories written down so they can digitalize it and just keep it as a tradition.
So where is our curation?
We would be posting our curation on our Instagram, but in a different way because we would be using two versions. One would be targeted to Korean audience, and the other one is targeted to Mexican audience. So for Korean, version, I would be translating Mexican oral traditions into Korean. And for Frida, she would be translating Korean stories into Mexican version.
And for the nature of our curation, we are thinking that we are not going to use English as a mediator because of the issue we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. So we don't want to rely on English to connect our cultures. We want to create direct bridges between our cultures. So that's why we're just doing the Spanish version and the Korean version.
And that's pretty much of our curation. We are very looking forward to it because then again, what Frida was saying, it's a very good opportunity to introduce each other's culture to our context.
And please share your thoughts with us about our curation and what do you think about our ideas. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.